which will impact, as we know, always on the world of business. And those two sort of are part of what is known as a social pact between Labour, business and government. But the ANC now has concluded its list conference. And this is a list of candidates who will represent the party in Parliament after the elections. Now, just who are the people on this list and how are they vetted? Well, for more on this, we're joined by political commentator, analyst Karima Brown. Karima, good morning and compliments of the season to you.
Same to you, Dan. Good morning.
It's good to see you, but we are starting this new year, of course, focusing on this ANC list coming just ahead of its 107th anniversary, which is going to be marked tomorrow by the January 8th statement delivery by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Before we talk about the list itself, I just want to know, where is the ANC at with this process? I'm asking this because there were some delays, like in the Northwest. Yes. Where are we at currently? Is it done and dusted?
Okay, so the national to national list, because remember, we're having two elections when we vote this year. We have provincial elections and we have national elections. So the national to national list process has been whittled down from 800 names to 200 names. Now the NEC will sit and vet those 200 names. So the list is actually not complete. What we have is the 200 candidates who made it through. Now the candidates have to be put through a vetting process. And part of the core issues around being on that list is the ANC says the candidates must be electable in terms of the guidelines of the party, and candidates must enhance the integrity of the African National
So the
Congress.
national to national now is 200 names moving to the NEC for a vetting process, yes, according to those criteria you've just, yes, mentioned, yes, in terms of electability and stand up to integrity in terms of scrutiny. Yes. The province to province one at that level, that's still underway?
Well, the only province that was outstanding is the Northwest, and that is, of course, as a result of the removal of the strongman Supramahuma Phelo, both as the Premier and as the provincial leader of the African National Congress. So they sat yesterday. Now, what people need to remember, Dan, is that the national to national list does not get voted at the provincial level. So that is why the ANC could proceed with the national process. So it's the province list that is being debated. Now, some reports are saying that late last night there was still chaos. We had very late registrations. Bojanela was the only region, I think, mid-morning that was registered. The conference was supposed to start at 6. There are mixed reports coming out. We still have to verify. Some saying they're not sure if the conference got underway. Other sources saying the conference had sat, they completed, they're busy counting now. So we need to verify precisely what has happened in the Northwest in terms of whether they're completing, that process which started yesterday. Okay. But they had a deadline. They had to complete it yesterday.
Okay. I'm sorry to be harping on the process, just for understanding, because the ANC is the majority party and, yes, the governing party. So national to national done. Now the next stage of vetting is going to take place according to the criteria. The provincial Northwest gets finished, let's say, by whenever they get finished. Do those provincial lists as well go through a vetting process?
Absolutely. All the lists must go through a vetting process. Remember, the African National Congress had its 54th conference at Nasrec, and it had a resolution where it drew up guidelines for the list committee. So, for example, one of the key issues that the ANC focused on yesterday was that the list needs to be non-racial in character. And that's, of course, really critical because, remember, former President Zuma said the ANC is a black party. And so there's a big push to return to the ANC's principles of non-racialism. The other big issue is, of course, the question of non-sexism. So every second name on the list must be a female name. So it's 50% of the list must be female. So
gender representation still big?
Not big. It is a criteria. It's an absolute must. And then the third criteria is that 20% of the representation of the people on the list must be under the age of 40, with the goal of increasing this to 30%. So there's also an appreciation for a generational mix, because remember, it is young people that makes up 49% of the voting population. And then the other important thing is, of course, also that some of the people who are in the National Assembly must be retained for that sense of continuity.
Okay, now there's been a lot of talk about unity in the ANC. You mentioned Nasrec conference that we saw in December 2017, And now Cyril Ramaphosa came on, he took over, and there are still these tensions that we're picking up, that although the ANC says we're not as factionalized as we used to be, how big will unity be a factor in the finalization of these lists?
It is an absolutely critical factor. What Cyril Ramaphosa's challenge is that he needs to have people who are, like the criteria says, electable, that doesn't have questions around the integrity, but he must also unify an organization. But the organization is rent down the middle because the people who are close to the Zuma faction are in fact regrouping and fighting back at all levels. So there are attempts to try and force an early NGC. There's people that's going around, people like Musibenzi Zwane and others have been accused of going around trying to campaign for an early NGC, depending how Cyril Ramaphosa does in the elections. And then the other thing, of course, is that a lot of people who simply do not make the criteria have been voted on the lists. People like Malusi Gigaba, people like Batabile Dlamini, Zwane, Zuma himself, who is in fact facing charges of corruption, who has to go to the Commission of Inquiry. So the vetting process is going to be very important, but Cyril Ramaphosa needs a infrastructure to fight the elections, and for that they need everybody to be on side. And yesterday at the press conference, Zizi Kodwa made a very important point. He said, no matter which faction you're in, if you want to be electable, you have to work for the ANC to win the elections first, because these lists mean nothing if the ANC, for example, drops below what some analysts have predicted, 50%. So it is in all their interests that the African National Congress wins decisively in this election, because otherwise they might well end up in some of the provinces in the opposition benches, as is the case in 3 municipalities at the moment.
We're going to have to wait and see how that is finalized. Thank you very much, Karima Brown, for your insights. As usual, political commentator Karima Brown just unpacking for us some of the implications and giving us some insights about the ANC's list. Now let's go.